Sometimes, criminals, convinced of their own unsurpassed cleverness and ability to predict the development of events several steps ahead, make a fatal mistake by neglecting seemingly insignificant details at first glance. And it is these seemingly minor details that often become the key to solving the most intricate crimes. Today we will dive into the horrific events that unfolded at dawn on March 2, 2010. In the cozy suburb of Chicago, the town of Darien in the state of Illinois, shots rang out in one of the typical private houses. The 911 emergency service received a desperate call from a frightened woman hiding in the basement. Armed robbers had broken into the house, putting the lives of all its inhabitants under mortal threat. But who were the attackers? How did they manage to get inside, and what did they intend to achieve with their attack? All this remained a mystery. Darien is a quiet town with a population of about 22,000 people, located near Chicago, which is included in the list of the 15 most comfortable settlements in this county to live in. But the bloody events of that morning will never be mentioned in tourist brochures. It all started on March 2, 2010. The pre-dawn silence was shattered by a sharp loud sound of gunshots. At 2:30 a.m., a disturbing call came to the Darien Police Department. On the line was a 25-year-old girl forced to hide in the basement of her own house. She reported that in the middle of the night, unknown attackers had broken into their home and opened fire. In total, about 10 shots were fired in various rooms of the house, and the panicked voice of the girl indicated that the attackers were apparently still inside. The name of the brave caller is Angela Kramer, and she was calling from her parents' house, where she had spent her entire life. The unfortunate Angela realized that the rest of her family had already been shot, and she had no doubt that the same horrific fate awaited her. The Kramer family lived in a quiet and calm area, and, according to general belief, perfectly fit into the atmosphere of the neighborhood. The owners of the large and tidy house had never had problems with the law, were polite and friendly neighbors. Within minutes of receiving the distress signal, police officers arrived at the scene of the tragedy. As they drove up to the house, they first noticed a young man climbing out through the window of the basement. At first, his behavior aroused suspicion. But soon it turned out that it was Anthony Kramer, Angela's older brother. He was spending the night in a room on the ground floor and, hearing the shots, tried to get out of the house. Anthony and Angela were the only ones lucky enough to survive that fateful night, and both were in a state of deep shock from what they had experienced. The Kramer family consisted of Jeffrey and Lori and their 3 children, 29-year-old Anthony, 25-year-old Angela, and 20-year-old Michael. The family enjoyed respect and authority among the townspeople. Jeffrey owned a car repair company. Lori worked as a caregiver in a nursery, was fond of gardening and adored animals. In 2010, the couple celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. The youngest son, Michael, had recently entered a technical institute, intending to follow in his father's footsteps. All family members were avid baseball fans. Their house had always been famous for its generosity and hospitality, but now 3 of its inhabitants lay dead. Upon entering the dwelling, law enforcement officers found Jeffrey, Lori, and Michael shot dead. The police entered through the front door. On the ground floor, right by the door, they found the motionless body of the head of the family, 50-year-old Jeffrey. His 40-year-old wife Lori was lying on the stairs, and Michael's body was inside, near the entrance to the garage. None of the 3 showed any signs of life, each having received several bullet wounds to the head. Apparently, the killer wanted to make sure that the victims would not survive. At that moment, the attackers were no longer in the house, but Angela was still hiding in the basement, where the police found her. The officers advised the girl to close her eyes and carefully led her outside so that she would not see her family in such a terrible state. While several law enforcement officers were securing the crime scene outside, a girl ran up to them, claiming that she, too, had been in the house during the attack. It was Michael's dead girlfriend. That night, she stayed overnight at the Kramers'. In the evening, she and Michael dozed off on the couch in front of the TV and woke up to the noise when the attackers broke into the house. When her boyfriend began to fight with the attacker, the girl realized that she would not be able to help in any way. She managed to escape unnoticed. Thus, she became the only witness capable of describing the robber. According to the girl's testimony, the attacker was a man dressed from head to toe in black clothes. A completely shattered window eloquently testified that it was through it that the robber got into the house. The burglary tool, a hammer, lay on the floor nearby. The attacker did not even try to hide his presence, unceremoniously breaking into the dwelling. He smashed the window pane in the living room, where Michael and his girlfriend were napping on the couch at the time. During the fight with Michael, the attacker fired several times, and Jeffrey and Lori, hearing the noise upstairs, rushed down. The distribution of bodies suggested that the father took the bullets himself, while the wounded Michael tried to crawl to the garage, but was stopped by another shot. The horrified Lori did not even have time to descend the stairs when a series of bullets caught up with her, and several 9mm shell casings were already glittering on the floor. The walls of the house retained traces of hits. The snow in the backyard betrayed footprints leading to the neighboring estate. Tracking them, the detectives came out onto the main street, where the trail broke off. Nothing valuable from the home was missing, so the version of a failed robbery seemed unlikely. Rather, the attack was a planned reprisal against members of the Kramer family. When asked if they had any ill-wishers among their acquaintances, Anthony shook his head in confusion, having no clue. But Angela suggested that the father of her child might be involved in the crime. The fact is that they had broken up quite recently, after the Christmas holidays, and the parting did not turn out to be too peaceful. The woman said that her ex had problems with anger control and could do very bad things during his outbursts of rage. At such moments, she tried not to catch his eye in order to avoid provoking him once again. Angela named his name, Johnny Borisov. She could not state for sure that he was capable of such a terrible act, but she could not suspect anyone else. Johnny at one time was friends with Angela's previous boyfriend, a guy named Steve, through whom they met. Steve, unfortunately, tragically died in an accident while riding a motorcycle, and Johnny supported the girl during that difficult period. Their relationship lasted about 2 years, and in 2009 the couple had a son. They lived together, but after the birth of the child, Johnny began to treat Angela in an overly possessive manner and was unreasonably jealous. He did everything possible to isolate his beloved even from her own family. This caused discontent both in Angela herself and in her parents. The Kramers had always been a friendly and close-knit family, so when Johnny tried to limit their communication, it led to serious problems in the relationship, which only worsened over time. A year before the attack on the Kramers' house, Johnny put a knife to Jeffrey's throat, threatening to kill him. And a month after that incident, he fought with Lori, Angela's mother, furious that he was not invited to celebrate his son's birthday. According to Angela, Johnny repeatedly threatened her family. His behavior became especially threatening in the last months before the girl could not stand it and left him. It was then that disputes began over custody of the child. The boy's father refused to pay child support and sought to obtain sole custody of his son. That fateful night, the baby was at the house of Johnny's parents. The police immediately became interested in Borisov. But even before the detectives had time to call him in for an interview, he himself called the police station. Johnny saw a news report about the attack on the home of his ex-girlfriend, the mother of his child. He knew perfectly well that he would become the main suspect in this case. So he did not wait for an official summons for interrogation, but appeared in the precinct of his own volition to talk with the investigators. Borisov realized that he would have to make excuses and was extremely dissatisfied with the current situation. Johnny was very nervous and assured the officers of his innocence. He came by himself because he knew suspicion would inevitably fall on him. The man was worried, but, hearing that Angela remained unharmed, sighed with noticeable relief. As it turned out, Borisov had an ironclad alibi. Surveillance camera footage confirmed his claim that he spent the entire night until 4 in the morning at a casino. The shootout took place at 3 o'clock, so Johnny could not possibly be present in 2 places at the same time. Taking into account that Borisov was the only person who had an obvious motive for the crime, law enforcement officers seized his cell phone to check for possible involvement in the shooting at the Kramer family's home. At night, several calls came to Johnny's number from a disposable phone, as well as a voice message from an unknown guy who introduced himself as Jake. The mysterious subscriber claimed that he was being chased by several black SUVs and that he would soon be forced to get rid of this means of communication. Shortly after that, a man called 911, informing that his former roommate, 23-year-old Jacob Nodors, behaved extremely strangely during the conversation and mentioned some criminal activities. Jake contacted his neighbor to say goodbye, believing that this might be their last conversation. He claimed that the police were chasing him, ready to open fire at any moment, and the guy was clearly losing his mind. The applicant explained to law enforcement officers that Jacob Nodors had been suffering from deep depression recently. If something really terrible happened to him, it could be the last straw. It also became known that Jake and the deceased Michael Kramer were close friends, part of the same company. At least until a few months ago, when a quarrel erupted between them. The reason for the conflict was that Michael was told about Jacob's close ties with Johnny Borisov, whom Kramer sincerely hated because of the constant threats against his family. The detectives began to study the personality of Jacob Nodors. Since the man who called Borisov on the night of the attack also introduced himself as Jake, the investigators found out that the guy's problems began in childhood. His parents were ardent religious fanatics, and their views went far beyond what was generally accepted, and they forbade their son from communicating with other people. If he dared to disobey, he felt the full force of parental anger. To somehow cope with his own problems, Jake began to abuse alcohol and illegal drugs. Eventually, the young man could no longer endure the insane atmosphere in his native home, and at the age of 18 he moved to live with his grandparents. But even despite this, his life steadily went downhill. Two friends with whom he often spent time recently died of an overdose, and Jake caught his girlfriend in the arms of their mutual friend. After that, the guy broke off relations with both of them and at that time was in an extremely unstable psychological state. Nodors met Johnny Borisov when he bought psychotropic substances from him. The man hinted to the young man that he belonged to an influential gang of drug dealers, and that these were very serious people. Jake took the connections with Johnny as a chance to join the circles of the powers that be. However, he did not suspect that friendship with Borisov would destroy his relationship with his best friend Michael Kramer. The police were interested in the tangled ties between Jacob Nodors, Johnny Borisov and Michael Kramer, so they decided to talk to Jake to clarify the situation. The young man had no criminal record, but had tried to commit suicide several times. The detectives tried to contact him using the disposable phone number, but no one answered. Then they turned to Nodors' grandparents. The elderly couple was convinced that their grandson had nothing to do with the crime. They described him as a modest and gentle guy. By profession, Jake was an auto mechanic and really had certain psychological problems, but was he capable of committing such a brutal crime? After checking several databases, the investigators found that Nodors had purchased a Glock 9mm pistol. The purchase took place just a few days before the shooting, at a sporting goods store located a 20-minute drive from the Kramer house. It seemed that for some reason Jake decided to escape from the city, so the police had to turn to federal marshals for help. A search warrant and permission to track the cell phone associated with the disposable number were obtained. Thanks to this, it was possible to find out that the young man was heading south, to the state of Florida. That's where his parents lived. Nodors was driving the car, tightly gripping the steering wheel with whitened fingers. Tears were rolling down his pale, haggard face. In the rearview mirror, Jake repeatedly envisioned flashes of blue and red beacons, and the guy tensely waited for the police to order him to stop at any moment. But for some reason this did not happen. As he raced down the dusty road towards his parents' house, Nodors, completely out of his mind from paranoia, even called 911 and claimed that he was being chased. Detectives contacted the police department in Florida, informing them that the suspect was heading into their territory. On March 3, 2010, the day after the horrific shooting at the Kramer's house, local law enforcement and federal marshals arrived at the home of Nodors' parents. Jake parked his van near his parents' house, and he, sleepy and confused, was taken into custody on suspicion of an armed attack. No pistol was found on him during the arrest. Trying to somehow calm his agitated nerves, Jake did not let go of the steering wheel all night. Under the influence of prohibited substances that caused hallucinations, the guy had visions of flashing police lights. It seemed to him as if several black SUVs were chasing him. Nodors realized that he had committed a monstrous crime, cutting short the lives of 3 innocent people. Thoughts about this filled him with fear and horror at the consequences of what he had done. During interrogation at the police station, Jake was nervous and did not say a word about his involvement in the attack on the Kramer house. Instead, he repeated over and over that his family was in danger. And only when the detectives managed to convince the young man that they would be able to provide protection for his loved ones in exchange for truthful testimony, Nodors began to speak. From Jake's words, it followed that the murder of the inhabitants of that house was the only way for him to save his own life and his family. Nodors and Borisov became friends back in the summer of 2009 and since then had spent a lot of time together. Johnny even sheltered Jake when he was evicted from his rented apartment. Sometimes the comrades would go to bars together, where Borisov would meet with his buddies. Jake saw with his own eyes what kind of guys they were. Nodors respected his older friend, but at the same time he was wary of him because of his connections in the criminal world. Recently, Johnny Borisov had been fiercely fighting with his ex-girlfriend for the right to custody of their common child. He sought to distance himself from her family, but what most worried the man was that Angela Kramer knew too much about the members of his gang and their affairs. Borisov told Jake that the woman had threatened to go to the police, so she needed to be silenced. Nodors unconditionally believed everything Johnny said, not even suspecting where he was pushing him. When Borisov told the guy that he would have to get rid of unwanted people, otherwise his own family would suffer, Jake agreed without hesitation. He understood that Johnny and his gangster friends could easily put the threats into practice. The only way to save himself and his loved ones was to dare to commit a crime. Moreover, Borisov assured the guy that on the designated day, several attacks would be carried out on people who threatened the gang. So Jake had the opportunity to prove himself and protect his family. But later it became known that no more attacks took place in the city. This suggested that Borisov simply used the naive young man for his shameful purposes. In fact, there was no gang. Johnny was just a petty dealer loser. He masterfully manipulated the boy, who had mental health problems and suffered from drug addiction. A few days before the massacre, Borisov ordered Nodors to buy a gun. Then he sketched a plan of the Kramer's house and explained the most convenient way to get inside. A specific date was set, March 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. The day before, Jake took a few pills for courage and set off to Angela's home. With a hammer, he broke the living room window, where he saw Michael and his girlfriend sleeping. Nodors hesitated whether to shoot his friend, but Michael attacked him with his fists and a fight ensued. Fearing that his identity would be revealed, Jake fired. The noise woke up Jeffrey and Lori, who rushed down the stairs. Jacob began shooting at them too. He was just panicking. Having dealt with the parents, Nodors caught up with the wounded Michael and finished him off with a shot to the head. Then he made a few more control shots to the heads of Jeffrey and Lori. Initially, Borisov had ordered Jake to search the entire house, including the bedrooms. But the guy was too afraid of being caught by law enforcement. Therefore, he only superficially examined the dwelling, not finding anyone else. Angela was hiding in the pantry, and Anthony was sleeping in a room on the ground floor, where the attacker did not even think to go down. Having committed the massacre, Jacob returned to his car parked nearby through the backyard and raced to Florida. During interrogation, Nodors admitted that he had thrown the murder weapon into a trash can near a restaurant. The gun and the attacker's bloodied clothes were found there. The firearm matched the shell casings found at the crime scene. On March 5, Jacob was extradited back to Illinois. He was placed in a cell next to Borisov. Listening devices were pre-installed in both rooms. Johnny, unaware of this, began to threaten Jake and unwittingly confirmed all his testimony. On March 6, Borisov was officially charged with organizing the massacre. In 2011, Jacob Nodors pleaded guilty to the armed attack on the Kramer family. He accused Borisov of planning the attack in order to take revenge on Angela Kramer, with whom he had a protracted struggle for custody of their young son. Nodors was sentenced to 75 years in prison. In 2013, Johnny Borisov stood trial. The lawyers tried to present the main witness and perpetrator of the massacre, Jacob, as a mentally unbalanced person, putting all the blame on him. But the jury did not fall for these manipulations. They found Borisov guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Having parted with the mother of his child, Johnny fervently believed that her entire family, including Angela, should die. He provided himself with an alibi. He planned to force a completely adequate guy to commit a brutal massacre, hoping that he himself would be able to avoid punishment. And as a result, now he is forced to rot behind bars until the end of his days. Borisov's mother refuses to believe that her son is capable of such cruelty. She participates in various projects, advocating for his release. The woman complains to the public that Johnny suffers from a severe form of diabetes, kidney disease, and congestive heart failure. And with such ailments, he is forced to stay in a prison cell. But it is hardly possible to talk about the presence of a heart in a person who, for the sake of his own benefit, doomed an entire family to death. That's all for now. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any future content. Take care and goodbye.